I grew up playing 4 or 5 sports when 13, 14 years old. Then once high school hit, I dipped it down to 2 between baseball and basketball. But I think being able to play multiple sports and just being able to experience, different athletic movements and different movement patterns has definitely been beneficial to my athletic development and has gotten me to where I am today. It also opens up opportunities just to meet new people, and it opens up opportunities because just for other sports. You don't really know what you want to play. I didn't really know I wanted to play baseball until I was like 16, 17 years old. So being able to play multiple sports from a young age, really, I was able to decide that I wanted to play baseball later on, but it kept my options open. So those are just a few topics that John wanted me to talk about, but you want to take any questions, John?
I think we're good.
Okay, but that's basically all I had. Appreciate you guys coming out and just give it up to John.
I mean, essentially, he hit on a lot of important things, and it's helped get him to where he's at. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Right in mind. So,
Thank you. Thanks for your attention.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
All right. So my name is John Pallof. I'm a physical therapist. I've been a physical therapist for about 22 years now. I've also had the good fortune of working in a strength and conditioning setting for probably the last 12 years, both here with Brian at Edge Performace Systems here and in Foxborough in the past, and then at Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning in Woburn. And then prior to that at Holy Cross with a fellow named Jeff Oliver. So I've been fortunate to be around these guys because they've taught me way more than PT school has about how to teach people how to move, to give me the opportunity to come into contact with a number of different athletes, particularly baseball athletes, which is where I've learned a lot of my knowledge. For years, I would train a group of professionals in the off season for a couple months, and a big part of my learning was listening to them, talk about what they like to do for their arms, what felt good, what their regimen was, the everyday kind of wear and tear that they experience, and also what they experienced growing up. And I was paying attention to what is their background, what did they play, how did they get to where they're at, what helped them. So my goal is to share some of this with you guys today. As you can see, we have parents here, we have baseball folks here, we have strength and conditioning folks, we have PTs, I believe, maybe some OTs. So I've done my best to try and make this straddle everybody's domain, okay, so that everybody can come away with something. A big problem that I see with youth baseball is there's a dearth of information, okay? There's no source of good information on, hey, here's what you should do. And unfortunately, a lot of people learn once they get hurt or their child gets hurt. Part of this is the lack of education. There is no good source. I mean, most of us, if you have kids, you've probably coached your kids' team when they were growing up, and we do it to help our kids out, help them have a good time, but there's nowhere for us to go and be like, okay, here's what you need to do to get these guys to develop their arm in a healthy way. Here's what you should be doing to teach them the fundamentals. And for your high school players, some of the scholastic rules, which I don't think have changed. There's rules where a baseball coach can't come into contact with their players until probably February or March. Okay, where these guys need to be getting ready from December or January. Okay, so it sets them up for failure. So we're going to talk about a number of different topics. It's a good group here, so feel free to chime in with questions. Okay, we don't have to wait. If you have a question, just raise your hand, and I'll answer it as best I can. Let me see here. There we go. All right. So the goals for today, all right, I want people to leave understanding the big picture, okay, on what the big picture is for developing the young athlete. Okay, this is a baseball talk, so there's going to be a lot of baseball specific things, but it's applicable to all young athletes, okay? There's a way to get them to develop, okay, and enjoy things, get better at their sports, and learn all the valuable lessons that go with playing sports. Just as an aside, if you guys want, there's a handout of slides on my website, which is pallofpt.com. If you scroll down on the main page, it says Arm Care Handout. So if you want to look at it now, you can, and I'll leave it up for a while. If you guys want to print it, feel free. So we're going to talk about the basics of a solid yearly throwing program, okay? We're going to talk briefly about how not to ruin your kids' experience. If you've been around youth athletics, or if your kids have played on teams, I think we've all come across these people. You know, at times we've probably all been that person, maybe just for a day. You know, so we'll talk a little bit about that, because I do believe that's important. And then some strategies that you can use to make it effective and fun for your young athletes. Okay? And then we're going to debunk some myths. As I said, it's a fairly diverse group here, so there'll be some examples for throwing programs and things like this. And they're examples, okay? So they're scalable, whether it's a little leaguer or a college player, okay? Understand that when you're looking at these things, there's going to be some adjustment, but the principles are the same, okay? And as I said, feel free to chime in with any questions that you might have, okay? Talking points, all right? We're going to talk about some typical injuries, okay, just quickly, all right? Playing multiple sports, the role of strength and conditioning, all right? In the development of the young athlete, the importance of rest, something that doesn't often get talked about. People talk about hitting lessons, throwing lessons, lifting weights, going to camps, going to tournaments, but people fail to talk about rest, which again cuts across any sport, okay? Skill acquisition, all right? Here at this facility, where Jason is the GM here at New England Baseball, and they have a whole array of pitching instructors, hitting instructors, all kinds of excellent programs to avail yourself of, okay? But as we'll talk about, sometimes the key is when you do it and what you're doing, okay? So we'll talk a little bit about that. Throwing programs, obviously, we'll touch a little bit upon pitching, okay? About how to develop a pitcher and when. Okay? Goal number one, right? If your child is going to be good at a sport, they have to enjoy it, okay? Or at least in most cases, unless your kid is exceptionally gifted, all right? Which all of mine are. Just kidding. So, you know, your child needs to enjoy it and be passionate about it. My son plays hockey. He's 9. And for any hockey parents out there, we started with tryouts in March, a parity tournament in April, practice in September, first game, the first weekend of September will end in March. Okay, with games every weekend and 3 practices a week, which we skip some of.
You're ending
okay, right? Exactly. And then the same thing goes for baseball and any other sport nowadays. Women's soccer, you can play year-round if you want. Okay, you know, so for my son, he loves hockey. He grew up around it. I used to work for the Worcester Sharks when they were here. And when he was a little guy, I'd bring him in with me, and he'd hang out 2-3 hours, hanging out with the guys. He'd go out on the ice, he'd play knee hockey with the coaches. And I think that's what kind of facilitated his kind of interest in hockey and his love for it. So it's not hard to get him to go to practice, okay? Not all the time, at least. But, you know, and the other key point here, and I see it in hockey, okay, with some of the parents on the various teams, some parents of athletes, of young athletes that I've worked with, 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 13-year-olds, don't ruin it, okay? The other facility I work at, there's a 10-year-old hockey player, and his father signed him up for 30 one-on-one training sessions, okay, strength training, and brings him in at 6:30 in the morning before school to work out. You think the kid's going to enjoy hockey or resent his father getting him up at 6 in the morning to bring him in? Okay, if you want your kid to be good, you gotta, let the kid sleep in, let him enjoy himself, and then do appropriate times, get him into the appropriate programs. Okay, but don't make him hate it. Okay, I mean, I myself with my son, not to go back to it, even with my son, I'll watch his games. I enjoy watching them, and he enjoys hockey. But I've learned to, after the games, hey, good game, buddy. Hey, that play you made by the goal, great job. Reinforce the positive. I don't get them in the car and be like, what did I tell you about back checking? Don't make your kid hate the sport, because then all the other stuff that we're going to talk about, throwing program, strength and conditioning means nothing because they're not going to want to do any of it. Okay, they want to play video games. You know, like I said, if your child enjoys a sport, provide them with sensible opportunities to get better at this sport. The key word being sensible. As I mentioned before, with a lot of these sports nowadays, if you were a baseball player, if you were a hockey player, a women's soccer player, you could play year-round, okay? Not all of it may be good, okay? You can play hockey year-round. You can play baseball year-round. But as we're going to talk about, part of your child developing is not playing that sport year-round. Take time off. Okay, it's not going to keep them from making the major leagues or whatever it might be, okay, or their varsity team. All right, it's actually very good for them. Okay. Big picture, okay, I mean the first one, maybe there's an asterisk, okay, because some kids obviously make it. But for most of us, the kid's not going to make a living playing this sport. Keep that in mind, okay, when you are encouraging your child to play and helping them, provide them opportunities to get better. Okay, I mean, at these hockey games, I'll see fathers kicking the back of a chair when their son lets a goal in. I hear them screaming instructions at them on the ice, which I can stand a foot for my kid and scream instructions, and he's not listening to me, so there's no way in hell he hears me on the ice. You know, sports teaches lots of great lessons, teamwork, okay, how to work hard, how to fail, how to win, how to be a good teammate. That's the kind of stuff that you need to encourage, okay? How to look at yourself and say, you know what, maybe if I want to make that varsity team, here's what I got to get better at. Or maybe I have to spend the summer with Brian to get bigger and stronger because I got to gain some weight, okay? There's lots of great lessons. That's why these kids should be playing sports, okay? And then if they're gifted enough to play professionally and have an opportunity, or in college or whatever, awesome, okay? You know, keep things in perspective, as I mentioned. And then if your kid enjoys a sport, it's a lot more fun to be good at it. Okay, I think we could all say that. When I was growing up, I was an average athlete. I love sports. But you know, it would have been cool to be one of the best players in the team, but I wasn't. Okay, but that's where this talk comes into play, like, okay, here's a sensible way to help your child develop, to give them an opportunity to get better, and then see where the cards fall. Okay, as far as, you know, if they make the varsity team, if they don't, at least provide them with a sensible way to get better at it. Provide them with opportunities. Okay? So, wait a minute, did I just miss something? Oh, there it is. The last thing, okay, I'm sorry, another extension of the big picture. Development occurs over the years, not in one contest or practice. Okay? I'm pretty sure that BC didn't approach Johnny at his 9-year-old Little League game. Hey, can you sign with me? I saw you out there. That backhand is spectacular. Okay, it occurs over the years. Keep that in mind. Okay, when you're dealing with your son or young athletes, if you coach, or collegiate athletes. Okay, kids will naturally become more athletic over the years. And then when I look at a sport, okay, or development, you can broadly categorize things into 3 categories. Physical capabilities, okay, which there are 2 things that go into that, okay, good genes from mommy and daddy, and then number 2, how hard do you work at things like in the gym with Brian, okay, recovering, nutrition, lifting weights, specific skills, okay, that's where you work with Jason's folks, okay, as far as working on owning your hitting, okay, your throwing, your fielding, you know, if you're a hockey player, your slap shot, your skating, whatever it might be, and then sports knowledge. Okay, that would be knowledge that you gain from situational awareness, whether it be in practice or games. That's actually playing your sport. Okay, I think this is a nice, easy way of categorizing things when you're thinking about development. Any questions so far? Not putting anybody to sleep yet? Okay. Physical capabilities, all right, strength, explosiveness, speed, size, okay, gaining muscle, coordination, okay, you can go on and on. Fitness levels, okay, fatigue resistance, stamina. All right, these are your physical capabilities. And as I mentioned, you know, some of it has to do with genes, okay, but a lot of it is under control of how hard you work in the gym, okay, and at home and in your lifestyle. How well do you eat? How well do you recover? Are you an athlete who's out drinking all night, 3 nights a week, 4 nights a week, okay? Do you get good sleep, okay? Those are things that are largely under our control. All right. Specific skill, that's your hitting, your throwing, your pitching, your fielding, your base running. Okay, so you build your physical capabilities, get stronger, get faster, get more explosive, okay? And then that carries over to these things, okay? Learning your hitting, learning how to hit an inside fastball, how to hit a curveball, how to throw, okay? How to build a strong arm over the years. And then pitching, fielding, base running, okay? And then sport knowledge, okay, is your situational understanding, okay? All right, man on second, 2 outs, where am I going with this ball? Okay, or if it's hit deep in the hole to the shortstop, where do I need to be? Where's the play at? Or is there a play? Or do I just eat it? Okay, that's what you gain from actually playing, okay? Experiential knowledge, okay, again, living those situations. All right, I got a grounder at second and I froze and I didn't throw home on the force. Okay, I went to second. All right, you learn. All right, that's how these kids develop. And then understanding the game. Okay, again, from playing. Okay, so the goals, okay, for development of the young baseball player are to safely maximize physical development with age-appropriate methods, which is what we'll talk about. Hi, Ryan. With appropriate methods, okay? There's a lot of kind of myths and misunderstandings out there, like, oh, lifting weights at a young age is going to hurt my kid's growth plate and they're going to be a midget, okay, or whatever it might be. There's a number of myths out there that aren't applicable, okay? Working to develop and refine skill in a smart way, all right, in a way that's going to carry over to them playing, all right? And then develop knowledge through playing, practicing, watching, and discussing. You know, my son and I will watch any hockey game that's on TV. He loves it. You know, and we'll just say, hey, look at that play that guy made. What a nice breakout pass, or whatever it might be. You know, and then when I scream at him on the way home from a hockey game. I don't. So, there we go. So typical injuries, okay, I just want to frame this discussion because this is what we want to avoid. Okay, if anybody here has played baseball, had kids that played baseball, or whatever, being injured sucks and you're going to miss a substantial amount of time probably, and it's going to not allow you to enjoy yourself, and it's going to hinder your development a little bit. All right, so the best strategy is to avoid these injuries, okay? And you can substantially decrease the risk of injury with a smart approach to your kid's development, okay? As I mentioned, injury equals lost participation, lost development opportunities. Hey kid, you played really well this year. Do you want to play on this tournament team? Well, yeah, we'd love to have him, but he missed the last 2 months with an elbow injury and he's not going to be ready, okay? So these are things that with a smarter approach and a little foresight and a big picture understanding, you can avoid. Okay, or at least decrease the incidence of. Time, okay, time spent healing, time spent reconditioning, that's an important one, because in baseball, if a guy has an elbow injury, okay, and he's not throwing a ball for 2 months, it's not just like, okay, 2 months, all right kid, you're up next, you know, 6 innings, let's do it. You know, there's time that has to be spent, another additional several weeks building up arm strength. Okay, taking swings in the cage, if you had a back injury, whatever it might be. There's time you need just to get back to the point where you can compete, okay? And then time spent getting back to prior skill levels. You come off of an injury, okay, then you spend your time reconditioning, and then you get back and you're back facing live pitching and you're like, holy moly, this game's moving fast. And it takes time for you to catch up, okay? So the moral of the story here is that there's a big chunk of time, okay, and its consequences that you can miss from getting injured. Okay, not to mention with young athletes, there's a psychological cost to it. They love playing sports, they love seeing their friends, they love competing, they love traveling. Okay, they get hurt and all of a sudden they're stuck with mom and dad, or they're stuck in the training room, or whatever it might be, or not on the mound, maybe they redshirt a year, you know, that stinks. Okay, and that affects them mentally. I work with a fair number of athletes, and probably half of it is the physical side of things. The other half of it is the mental side of things. Keeping them busy, like, hey, okay, your knee's messed up, but go see Brian. I'll talk to Brian. I'll tell him, you know, I'll give him an idea of some parameters of what you can and can't do, and then he can work your tail off. You know, coincidentally, what I find a lot of the times is with athletes, they learn how to take care of themselves for the first time after they've been injured, because they have nothing better to do. They can't compete, they can't travel, okay, so then they get in, they work their butt off, they gain strength, they get bigger, you know, so there is a silver lining to it, but you can also learn that from not being injured. Okay, typical injuries, growth plate injuries. There's growth plates in your elbow, in your arm, in your shoulder, your back, okay? And growth plates are essentially, it's a little thin layer of cartilage or something like cartilage between two layers of bone, okay? I see it in young throwers a lot, where you'll get, essentially you can get a fracture through the growth plate, you can get inflammation through the growth plate, okay, in the elbows of young pitchers and things like this. And that's those are nasty injuries. They can take a long time to recover from, sometimes they're surgical. And regardless, a lot of the times they're also something that the kid will struggle with down the road. Okay, so that's the big thing that we want to avoid, all right? I'm sure everybody's heard of the ulnar collateral ligament, UCL, Tommy John, okay? You know, it's probably about a year and a half, and then once they're back competing, it's generally about a full season before they're back at their prior skill levels. Okay, you can have the surgery, but you're probably not throwing until, gosh, I don't know, 8 months, 9 months, and then there's a whole build-up period, okay, where you're trying to strengthen your arm, regain velocity, okay, and then hopefully get back into competition. It takes a while, okay, and these are professionals who have nothing else to do, okay, so the same goes for high school athletes and younger. Unfortunately, you're seeing these younger and younger, okay, which is just bananas, okay. Tendinitis or apathy, that could be 2 to 8 weeks. Having shoulder surgery, bad news, okay, a labral repair, a rotator cuff repair, you know, generally you're never the same, okay, as far as velocity goes, maybe movement, maybe even just not being able to pitch without being sore, okay. Now that's not all the time, all right, but it takes a long time. And generally if a guy, let's say, throws 95 prior to tearing his labrum or having a labral repair, you know, I'm happy if they get back to 92 or 93, okay? Which, I mean, that's obviously at a high level, all right? But that's a big difference at that level, okay? So, and again, as you might imagine, you get younger, okay? It gets more magnified. I tore my labrum when I was 13, I think. Derailed a once promising baseball career. But it was, honestly, I went to practice, I went out into right field, I didn't warm up. I fielded a ball and I went to chuck it back in and I was like, oh. And then I couldn't even lift my arm to get it back. And back then it was an x-ray. Well, you didn't dislocate it, you know, did some band exercises and then my arm was junk. I mean, even now I'll try and throw with some of the guys I rehab or I'll throw with the kids. I could do it, but it's not comfortable and it's not a bullet. So we want to avoid those. And then ulnar nerve issues, okay, long time. There's a nerve that goes through your arm, comes down under the elbow, okay, and innervates a bunch of muscles in your hands, your forearm, and sometimes you can develop some neuropathy, which is where the nerve gets irritated, stops conducting impulses very well. There's actually a picture up here. You know, you want to avoid those, because those can end your career at a worst case scenario. Best case scenario, you're out for a while, okay? This is a guy from probably, I don't know, 10 years ago. Do those two hands look the same? You see the difference? Okay, so right here, he's a right-handed thrower, okay? Look at the atrophy in his hand, okay? That's from an ulnar neuropathy. His ulnar nerve was getting irritated. They did a surgery called a transposition where they move it and they kind of tack it down. That didn't work. And then they did it a second time and he was left with this. So as you might imagine, he didn't play baseball anymore, okay? So again, that doesn't happen. Like if your kid's elbow is hurting, it's not like, that guy Brian said that, oh my God, my kid's career might be over, what have I done? You know, but the possibility exists that number one, if you get injured, it could lead to this, or if you don't handle things right, it could lead to this. It's fewer and farther between, but it happens to some people, and if it happens to somebody that you know, it stinks, okay? There's another view of it. You can see that right hand, there's a big, big difference. The nerve got choked off, got damaged, and that's what he was left with, okay? Okay. Any questions so far? Okay, we'll try and get this through this, get you guys to the Red Sox game. So, But playing multiple sports, as Johnny had touched upon, is very, very important in the development of an athlete. I don't care if it's baseball, hockey, basketball, racquetball, whatever, okay? Play multiple sports. As I mentioned before, taking 3 or 4 or even 5 months off from your kid's favorite sport isn't going to keep them from reaching the NHL or MLB. Okay, number one, they're going to enjoy it. Number two, they're going to become a better athlete. It's true, okay? As Johnny had touched upon, it enhances athletic development, okay? Doing different movements and exposing yourself to different movement patterns and different demands of sport will make you a better global athlete. Anybody, well, maybe not anybody, but most people who reach the professional level, you talk to them and they're like, oh, I play baseball, I play basketball, or I played football, and generally they were pretty exceptional at other sports as well. They were just good athletes, and being good athletes playing multiple sports made them a better athlete. Okay, that goes from any age up. Okay, once you get to high school, okay, maybe then you start to whittle things down a little bit. Late in high school, maybe you specialize if you're going to go on and play in college. Okay, but up until then, don't even think about it. Okay. Decreases the risk of overuse injuries, your growth plate injuries, nerve injuries. Okay, you learn varied movement skills. It's fun. Okay, your kid can make more friends. Friends are important. Okay. Multiple sports. Again, you'll see, this is just my anecdotal observations, but you'll see diminishing returns with early specialization. Well, my kid loves baseball, and his 8-year-old coach said he's really gifted. So I guess the more he plays, probably the better he's going to get. It's not true, okay? You hit a point where the diminishing returns and how much better they're going to get does this, okay? So just don't bother, okay? If anything, getting them into playing basketball or playing football is going to continue their athletic development this way, okay? The long season will wear them down, all right? They'll become disengaged, okay? Which gets back to my first slide. They need to love the sport, okay? They'll start to hate it. They can get hurt. The other thing I talk about as well is the timing of skill practice relative to season, which we'll talk about. All right. Profit motive can ruin things, okay? You can do skill stuff year-round. If you have any kids who play, okay? Like, again, getting back to my son's example of hockey. He also plays baseball, but I mean, he could skate year-round if he wanted to. There's more than enough people who are willing to take my money. Okay, I can send him to the shot doctor. I can send him to power skating. He can play in a summer league. He can play in short ice. The profit motive, they'll push it upon you. And Jason's guys here do not do that, just so everybody's aware, okay? They're on board with the proper philosophy. But, there are people who push it upon you, okay? Don't fall prey to it, all right? There's an explosion of travel teams, tournament teams, fall ball, you name it. Okay, don't feel like you need to do it, all right? Again, don't succumb to peer pressure, keeping up with the Joneses. And again, I've just experienced this with my own experience with youth sports with my son. If there's a kid who's really good in the team, you're like, well, what's Johnny doing? Not you, but whatever. What's Johnny doing this fall? Well, his dad's putting him in this, power skating clinic and the shooting clinic. I'm going to put Jordan in there, because then he'll be as good as Johnny. That just doesn't work, okay? Strength and conditioning, okay? This is a big one, all right? And this gets to talking about what we do here at Edge, okay? This is an inarguable fact, okay? Being bigger, faster, stronger, more explosive, injury resistant, well-conditioned will make you better in whatever sport you play, period. Okay, I don't think I need to make many examples of that. Mike Trout, okay, that's a guy who looks like he's built to play linebacker, 230, 240 pounds, and can jump out of the building. that in and of itself makes what they do here very important. Okay, if you do want to give your kid an edge, okay, in their sport, no pun intended, okay. The easiest thing to do that is going to help your kid is, in any sport they play, is work on those qualities. Find a reputable professional, okay, to help them with these things. And they'll get bigger, they'll get stronger, they'll learn how to sleep, okay, they'll learn how to eat, all right? And that will give them a big advantage. I mean, if you think about it, look around at your 13-year-old baseball team. You'll see some kids who are, starting to get a little hair in their chest, they're getting a little muscular, their voice is dropping, all right? Become a better athlete, as I mentioned, become more explosive, run faster, jump higher, be able to lift more weight, exert more force, okay? These next ones are very important, they're often overlooked. People think about a gym, they think about iron, okay, dumbbells and barbells, okay? But really, learning nutrition and how to eat, very important. I know these guys here will do a food blog. Okay, write down and tell me what you're eating. Tell me when you're eating it, how much you hydrated. And then they sit down and they go, okay, you need more vegetables, you need less processed foods, you need less sugar. Okay, through that process, your kid learns how to eat. All right, as an athlete. And even after being an athlete, that carries through into adult life. Okay, learning how to recover and the importance of sleep, very important. Okay, after a long weekend, you played 2 games at the NEBC, you're tired, you're sore, go home and hop on a foam roller, okay? Foam roll your muscles out, do a little bit of stretching, make sure you go to bed on time, okay? Things like this, hydrate. And then learning how to keep what you gained in the off season during your season, okay? Meaning you don't just stop working out during your season. It changes dramatically, okay, what you're doing and how much of, okay? But you don't want to just work out all season and, hey, you get the certificate, you gained a lot of muscle, you gained a lot of strength, you can do 18 pull-ups, and then you go and you play for 6 months and you don't touch a weight and then you come back weak again. Okay, there's a very easy way to avoid that, and that's working with these guys to teach you, hey, here's what you do in season. Okay, just work out twice a week for a half hour. Okay? Again, it's gaining lean mass, improving body composition, gaining strength, improving explosiveness, enhancing your core and spinal stability, develop shoulder complex strength and fatigue resistance. Okay, that's an important one for pitchers. All right, and building cardiovascular fitness and fatigue resistance. Okay, all of these things are good qualities to improve upon, and that's why strength and conditioning is so important. Okay. How old? Okay, as far as how old should my kid be when they start with this? It can vary. Brian could probably speak to this better, but I'd say probably around 12 or 13 years old, give or take your kid's level of physical maturity. Kids mature at all different levels, or all different rates, I should say. You can have an 11-year-old who looks physically mature. They're probably ready to start working out, versus a kid you look at and you're like, maybe another year or so, okay? But generally around that age is a good time for these kids to start, okay? It's easy for them to make physical gains, okay? Anybody here who's middle-aged knows, like, oh God, as you get older, it's so much harder to lose the weight, or it's so much harder to get muscle. It's true, because as we age, we change a little bit. I mean, number one, we don't sleep, all right? If you have kids, a job, stress, which I have all of, it makes it harder to make gains. It makes it easier to gain weight. Kids, I mean, they don't have a lot of stress, play video games, go to school, get good enough grades so my parents stay off my back, go play sports, go ride my bike. That's pretty cool. I would love to do that. All right? Their hormonal profile, they're full of hormones. They're growing. Okay? So the hormones that are whipping around their body, making them think like idiots, also make them gain muscle easy. Help them make physical adaptations easily. Okay, that's why it's not just like, hey, okay, 12 years old, start working out. It's like, no, at 12, 13 years old, that's the beginning of a very important window where your kid or the athlete can make tremendous gains. Okay, maybe between 12 years old and maybe their junior year of college. Okay, if they've been training correctly. All right. And it's not rocket science, it's not neurosurgery. Show up for your workouts. If Brian says, hey, you need to be here 3 days a week, show up 3 days a week. That's not that hard, okay? Do set workouts. Here's your card. Here's what we're going to do today. Listen to what Dan tells you, or Darren tells you. He's going to walk you through. Your parents are spending their hard-earned money to put you here. Do it, okay? And then, go home, eat, and sleep. All right? I mean, consistency is king. That's how you make gains. As I mentioned before, your physical gains, there's a very large effort component in that. You can't alter your genes. Your jeans are what they are, okay? And I don't mean the jeans you wear, okay? But how much effort you put in and maximize your physical potential is entirely in your control. You're a fool if you don't do it, okay? And that goes for any sport, all right? Have a plan, okay? You know, the off season is the time to make your gains, okay? I often get the question, like, they're out of season or they're going into their off season. You know, how many times should my kid come in? My kid's coming in once a week. I'm like, my answer is, you know, as much as you can get them here between 3 and 4 times a week. The more you do, the better, to a degree, okay? That's the off season. During the off season, more of your pie, okay, is going to be devoted to non-baseball things. More of your pie is going to be developed to improving those physical capabilities we talked about. Okay, so get more explosive, gain weight, eat, okay, get stronger, get more fit. That's when you build your base, okay? You don't build your base. Once the season starts, practice starts, games start, you aren't going to make gains. You can make mild gains, but not like you will in the off season, okay? Because now more of the pie is going towards baseball, okay? And a good rule of thumb is that if you build a good base in your off season, you can work out in season, but you should never be sore. You shouldn't wake up the next day and be like, oh God, I can barely walk. That was a tough one. You know, if that's the way you're feeling in season, it's going to impair your performance. That's why you put your time in the off season. Okay? And then in season, like I mentioned, the goal is to maintain or at least slow the decline. Are you going to get weaker as the baseball season goes on? Sure. Okay, but is it going to be this fast or is it going to be this fast? Okay? And that goes for all ages, okay, from 12 on up, like I mentioned. Okay? Any questions so far? Okay. Rest. Okay, like I mentioned, this often gets overlooked. You know, a lot of people, you would think you wouldn't have to mention this, okay, but as I mentioned, there's tons of activities for your kids to do, okay? And again, I've fallen prey to this before as well. You know, your kids should have 1 to 3 days off a week from their sport. That depends on their age, obviously, okay? But again, it's not going to derail their professional career, okay? If they're 9 years old and they're practicing twice a week and they have 2 games on the weekends, awesome. Maybe if you want to do a day of like a hitting lesson or something like that, great. But it shouldn't be Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then we're going to take the 3rd Sunday of every month off. Okay, that's, again, it's going to kill your kid's passion for the sport, and it's counterproductive for development. Okay, and also physically it wears them down, okay, and it starts to eat into their physical development.
So, when you're saying they should have 1 to 3 days off per week from that specific sport, you're not necessarily saying like any physical activity.
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Depending on.
You know, but along the same line. So if your kid's playing flag football and playing hockey at the same time, I wouldn't recommend that your kid's playing sports, competitive sports or structured sports 6 or 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And it does happen. You know, but no, they can do other things, and that gets back to our discussion about multiple sports. You know, because at that age, and again, this kind of gets back to avoiding overuse injuries, okay? Making sure your kid still enjoys the sport and making sure they're continuing to get better and they're getting adequate rest so they can perform, okay? I mean, you guys know, I mean, nowadays there's more pressures on kids. There's more activities for them to do, okay? I mean, I find time, my kids sometimes are like, oh, I just never get a day to myself, and I'm like, kind of right. You know, I mean, he just wants to go out, get on his bike, and go ride around and play with his buddies. Okay, you know, so keep that in mind when you're looking at their schedule. Okay, and again, it breaks them from the repetitive stresses of their sports. This avoids your tendinitises, your growth plate injuries, and things like this. Okay, establish good sleep habits at a young age. Okay, I mean, I try and have my kids in bed at a reasonable time. 8:30, you know, whatever, have a reasonable time. There are parents out there who will let their kids stay up till 10, 10:30 until they're tired, playing video games, watching TV, and that's just the wrong thing to do. I'm not going to tell people how to parent, okay, but your kids need their sleep. Kids sleep for a reason, okay, because they're growing, their brains are growing, they're physically maturing, Okay, a lot of important things happen while you sleep. Okay, your body recovers, refreshes, your body produces hormones when you sleep. Okay, I'm sure everybody in here has had a shitty night's sleep before. Sorry. You know, crappy night's sleep. You know, if I have, you know, a child, I have, you know, 3 of them. There were times when I'm like, oh shit, I forgot my pants. You know, maybe not, but something along those lines. It impairs, your brain functions worse when you're tired for a reason. So make sure that your kids get into good habits. Don't let them sit on a screen, okay, for 3 hours and then say, bedtime. Their brains have been going like this, they've been using their hands, maybe they're yelling at their buddies through their headsets. They're not going to sleep well. It's going to take them a while to get to sleep, number one, and then to get into deep sleep, okay, which we'll talk a little bit about here. You know, reasonable bedtime and then no screen time 60 minutes prior to bedtime. Okay, very simple, all right? Inevitably, when you put them to bed, can I have a snack? Have a snack. I'm hungry. Well, you weren't hungry 5 minutes ago. Rest, again, building in rest periods through the year. Okay, remember this is a year-long process developing these kids, okay? So, you know, a prolonged period, like when they're playing another sport, 3 or 4 months with no baseball. Okay, that's good time off from baseball, all right? Between seasons, okay, if they play summer ball and they have a fall ball team, give them a week to 10 days of no baseball. Okay, they've had plenty of baseball to that point, and they're going to do more baseball. Give them a break. Okay, number one, it'll let their body become more fresh. Physically, they'll feel better, and mentally, they'll become more engaged again. Okay, and it also, again, it gives the body a break from these repetitive stresses. Okay, again, weekly, like we talked about, small breaks as the schedule allows. If some of these kids are playing on AAU teams or travel teams or whatever, and there's a holiday and a period of time around it where there's no competitions or practices, give them the time off. Give them 3 or 4 days. Okay, it's important. Again, for health and for kids enjoying and being engaged in things. And then for parental sanity, and this is from personal experience, a period of nothing, which for me is from probably late July till the end of August. No goddamn CCD, okay? No hockey, no baseball, no dance, no tumbling, you know, none of it. We go home, we have fun, hang out, dad can have beer, okay? You know, take a break, all right? Okay, rest, as I mentioned, okay, specific to baseball, okay, it's very important that your child or that the young athlete or even the professional, okay, has a prolonged period of no throwing. So for example, a professional at one end of the spectrum, okay, a physically mature male athlete, okay, who plays professionally and is physically developed and adapted to that sport, they may throw their last pitch end of September. They probably won't pick up a ball again until at least the middle of November. Okay, they take a long period of time off. I forget what the number was, but I was chatting with a guy, a pitcher, and I want to say it's somewhere around, and I may be wrong, but between bullpens, long tossing, warm-ups between innings, and actual outings, it's like 30 to 35,000 throws at varying intensities, okay, squeezed into 9 months. That's a lot, okay? That's a lot to ask of a one body part, okay?
Would you say that, like, the younger the player is, the more time off they need, or is that kind of more based on their...
Generally, like I mentioned from the beginning, it's scalable. So I wouldn't, a young athlete, a month and a half isn't enough. Okay, probably closer to 3 to 5 months, okay, to be honest with you. And again, you'll be amazed because they'll get back from their period of time off and they'll physically developed in that 3 to 5 months, because sometimes they go to bed and they wake up bigger, and all of a sudden they can throw harder. Get out of here, okay? They didn't have to touch baseball. So yeah, so it's definitely, you want to keep in mind the athlete's age.
How much is that also consistent with up here in the Northeast, we may not have as much time in playing baseball as they would down south or west?
Precisely.
Does that still come into play with?
Oh yeah, built-in rest, absolutely.
Not built, I understand building in the rest, but that, even that much period.
Yeah,
That's what I'm going to.
What you'll find is, so if your kid's fortunate enough to move on in their career, like let's say as a pitcher, to where they're in college and beyond, some programs will look for pitchers from cold weather climates because they have lower mileage arms. Okay, forced lower mileage arms, because to your point, if you live in California, you can play baseball and throw year round. But every throw you make takes a little bit out of your arm, okay, over the course of time. You know, I mean, with the rate now of Tommy John surgery in professionals or mature, where they've had enough throws to get to the point where that ligament fails, you know, being a lower mileage pitcher is going to help you, okay, with your durability, how fresh your arm is. So you know, yeah, I mean, in New England, it's okay to maybe have a little longer period of rest.
And would you have the same amount of rest if the child is a pitcher or just a?
Even a thrower.
I understand
Yeah.
there's rest there too, but would the rest be longer if they're a pitcher as well?
It would be roughly the same. Maybe the position player could have a shorter preseason ramp up, okay, which we're going to talk about. But roughly the same, I would say. You know, what will change is how you configure your throwing program. Okay, at what point in your off-season throwing program you start to introduce flat ground work, and then when you get off of a mound, versus say a shortstop where he's just concerned primarily, he doesn't care about throwing a curveball, he just needs to be able to throw the hell out of the ball, okay, from all different positions, angles, momentum. So yeah, so there are some subtle differences, but the principles are the same. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so prolonged period of no throwing, and again, depending on age, okay, back to your point earlier, okay, you need to closely monitor how much pitching a young player is doing. This includes bullpens, flat grounds, and actual pitching. Okay, it's not just, well, hey, my kid only had 20 innings this year. Okay, but they've also been doing bullpens twice a week, and they've had a pitching coach. Okay, all that stuff counts towards stress on an arm. Okay. Rest for pitchers, okay. You know, back to your question, it's a little specific to pitchers, okay? You're going to adjust volume, intensity, and frequency, okay? Meaning how much throwing are you doing, how hard are you doing it, and how often are you doing it, based on a few different things. And some of this is applicable to New England, okay? In that, where are they at in their calendar, okay? If they live in a warm weather climate, all right, their calendar is going to be different than a New England calendar, okay? Are they at the preseason, mid-season, postseason? Okay, they might not need nearly as much throwing towards the end of the year. Okay, how they feel? Oh, God, my arm's just hanging. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel live. It's a little sore. That's when you're not going to be like, all right, let's going to do the same thing. It's more like, okay, let's take our foot off the accelerator a little bit for a brief period of time. So adjusting based on how they feel. Okay, and then what recent throwing and pitching have they done? Okay, so if they live in New England and you're trying to play baseball in late February or March, I mean, there's colleges in New Hampshire that play outside in February, okay, you know, you can adjust, all right? If you don't get off of the mound for the first 3 weeks, then you can feel free to ramp things up a little more, okay, versus, okay, I've been pitching consistently for the last 3 weeks because we've had good weather, or I've been inside, then you're going to adjust accordingly. Does that make sense? It's not specific, but you just kind of look at it, you know, what you want to do is with your athlete, whether you're a college player or a youth player, is keep track, okay? Keep a little notebook and just write down, okay, you know what, he threw a bullpen today, 25 pitches. Okay, so that way you can look back and you can track your volumes, okay, and you can see where they're at, because, I mean, I can't remember what the hell I ate for lunch yesterday, so I'm not going to be able to remember what my son did off of the mound 2 weeks ago, you know, so that's an easy way to remember what they're doing and monitor their volume so that you can adjust things on the fly, okay? And when I'm talking about all these concepts, like the throwing program, volume, and stuff like this, they're not concrete, okay? There's not one specific way to do things. It's more a set of principles that you can use to kind of formulate what works for you, okay? And just starting with something simple, and then as the kid matures, okay, you can adjust according to what they like, how they feel, and what's worked for you and what hasn't, okay? This isn't like, this is the way you have to do it. Okay, but there just has to be a rhyme and a reason to it. Important little thing here, okay? You know, every throw should have a purpose. as we mentioned before, you know, the arm only has so many throws in it. So what you want, back to your point, is if your son is going out to long toss, okay, there needs to be a purpose for it. Okay, I'm stretching his arm out, I'm building up some tolerance in his arm, we're trying to build some strength in it. Okay, versus, okay, it's August, his arm's hanging, he's just gonna go out and play catch to 75 feet just to get loose and feel good. Okay, what you don't want is you don't want kids just going out and playing catch and shooting, hey, did you see that game on Saturday, or did you see what little Jimmy did last game, or whatever, and just mindlessly throwing over and over and over and over again. Okay, especially as you get older. Okay, throwing programs, okay, and this is where I find there's a dearth of knowledge. You know, for anybody here who's a healthcare professional, okay, this is important stuff to know, because in the clinic you can get their elbow feeling better, you can get the swelling out of there, they'll be pain-free, and they're quote-unquote rehabbed, okay, missing a quote there. But then it's like, okay, now they want to play baseball. All right, now how do I get them from being clinically rehabbed to being able to throw 3 innings? Okay, and this is where knowing what you're doing, again, just the basics of educating with a throwing program is important. And as I mentioned, the slides are on my website if you guys want to download these at another time, okay, if you want to follow along. So don't feel like you have to jot all this down. You know, it's, as I mentioned before, scholastic rules affect it. Throwing programs are probably the single biggest missing piece I see in injury reduction. Okay, high school, let's say you have a high school junior. He's playing basketball or he's playing hockey, and he's playing it all the time. Okay, and let's say hockey ends in, here in Massachusetts, the tournaments are what, in March, right? February, March, Super 8. Okay, a lot of these kids, what they'll do is they go, ah, God, I really enjoyed hockey season, it's over, but, okay, there's my glove, all right, baseball practice is tomorrow, okay, and they haven't thrown a ball, all right, and that's when the window for getting hurt kind of opens, because they've done nothing to prepare, okay? It's not an issue, I shouldn't say it's not an issue, it's not a function of playing yourself into shape, okay? You can do that, you can probably get away with it sometimes, okay, but you're kind of rolling the dice, all right? I'm willing to bet that most elbow injuries, most UCL ruptures or tears probably occur, I'm going to say March, April, maybe May, and then it tails off. Okay, and the reason is, okay, is because they didn't prepare their arm. Okay. Everybody knows what a writer's callus is, right? Okay. A little bump here that you get from writing with a pen. All right. If you don't write, okay, little Johnny Pallof is in summer vacation. He's away from school. All right. I'm not writing. Okay. My callus goes away. All right. Because I've removed the stressor, okay, of the pen chafing my finger. All right. I go back to school, okay, and I start writing again, and in the course of a couple of weeks, I start to develop another writer's callus, okay? That's because there's a stressor that's been introduced, okay, the chafing of the pen, all right? The body says, ooh, there's a chafing stress on his finger that we need to be able to withstand, and it lays down callus tissue. The same thing goes for throwing arms. That UCL, your rotator cuff tendons, your labrum, your bones, okay? All of that, the throwing program is being structured to try and thicken these tissues up, to make them more resilient and stronger. That's why your UCL injuries typically occur early, okay, is because they didn't spend sufficient time throwing in order to build the callus, so to speak. I mean, that's what strength and conditioning is based on. They're applying a very specific stimulus, and the body's going to adapt to it. Okay, I sit at home and eat wings and drink beer, I get fat. Okay, if I get up and I run, I watch what I eat, and I run regularly, I get unfat. Okay, that's the stressor and no stressor. Okay, you know, and the same thing applies for your throwing programs. So, and that's where how you design these programs comes into play. Okay, let me see. Key considerations, where are you in your calendar? Okay, is it November or is it January? Okay, or is it July? Is it preseason, early, mid-season, or off-season? To your point, in New England, what space do you have available, or do you have a throwing partner that you can throw with? Okay, that's a very real, practical consideration. We don't all have, a ton of space to throw in, and nobody wants to throw when it's 10 degrees outside. Okay, so sometimes, especially in New England, we need to be you need to kind of improvise a little bit. All right. What position do you play? Are you a shortstop? Are you a first baseman? Are you a catcher? Or are you a pitcher? Okay, or an outfield? And then do you have an injury history? Are you coming off of an elbow injury or shoulder injury? Okay. Key variables. Okay, I'm going to try and keep this fairly simple because I like simple and it is simple. Okay. Frequency, meaning how many times are you throwing? How many times a week are you throwing? Okay, so it's very simple. Week 1 of your off season, the frequency is going to be lower, and as time goes on, it's going to get higher. Okay, I decided to get unfat this summer, which hasn't worked real well, but it's working. Okay, I started running twice a week and for a short distance, and as I got more fit, I was able to do more. Okay, the same thing applies for throwing. Start with twice a week. Okay, building up to, if I'm going to be in my season and I need to be able to throw 6 days a week, guess what I need to be able to do probably the last couple of weeks before my season starts? Throw 6 days a week. Okay, again, it's not complex. Volume, okay, is how much and how many. And this gets back to what I was talking about as far as using a little journal. Okay, if you have an athlete, get a little notebook and just when they throw, write down how many and at what distances and the date. Okay, because again, common sense is you're going to start with low volume. I'm going to start out with 25 or 30 throws. And then as my preseason goes on, I'm going to build volume to the point where maybe I'm at 50 or 60 throws. Okay? Because you're trying to build up your body's tolerance to doing what you're asking it to do in season. Does that make sense? Okay? And then the third variable is intensity. How hard? Okay? A good analogy would be like lifting weights. If I'm doing a deadlift, am I doing 1 rep at 100% of what I can do? Or am I doing 15 reps at 50% of what I can do? Same thing applies for throwing, okay? And generally the way you measure that, or can quantify that, is how far, or if your athlete is somewhat mature, how perceived intensity. Like I'm throwing the crap out of the ball, or I'm just kind of tossing, okay? Again, this is not nuclear science. You don't have to worry like, oh God, did he throw a little too hard? I told him to throw 75%, I think he threw 80. It's not that. It doesn't have to be that detail-oriented. Frequency, okay, again, first you got to know what's going to be your normal workload, all right? Are you throwing 5 days a week? Okay, then when you're looking at your throwing program building up to the start of practice, you need to be ready to do that, okay?
Excuse me?
Yes.
All ages too? Maybe just like someone-
Yes, so this is where, again, it's scalable. So, like my son's 9, he'll probably play baseball 4 days a week. I want him at least throwing 3 or 4 days a week before leading into the season. But I'm not going to have him throwing 6 or 7 days. It is scalable, based on their physical maturity and their age. Versus a professional who, when they get into camp, they're going to be able to throw every day. And I've seen, and this was a while back, this was probably 10 years ago, but there was one organization where their off-season throwing program capped out at 3 days a week. But then you show up at training camp and you're throwing 6 days a week. That makes no sense. Okay, and your odds are you're gonna have a lot of injuries, because it's just, they weren't prepared. So, as a rule of thumb, gradually build. Start with 2 times a week for maybe the first 2 weeks, and then building to eventually 5 to 6 days over the course of 6 to 8 weeks. And again, all these numbers are scalable based on your athlete's age, okay? Initially when you start frequency-wise, start with a rest day after every session, okay? Building to consecutive days around weeks 4 or 5, okay? So for example, in week 1, I don't want them throwing Monday, Tuesday, and then Thursday, because I don't want back-to-back days, okay? Versus, say, week 5, hey, how you feeling? Great. How's the ball coming out of your hand? Feels good. all right, well, I want you to go Monday, Tuesday, off day Wednesday, and then go Thursday, Friday. Does that make sense? Because eventually, again, we're trying to build towards what they're going to have to do. Okay, but if you have time leading into the season, you can get there in a methodical process. And this is how you ensure a healthy arm. Okay, or even 3 days. You know, most kids that age don't do much of anything. All right. You know, again, frequency. Don't be afraid to take a day if the arm feels excessively sore early on. Like, ooh, man, my elbow's really sore. Well, is it your normal soreness? Yeah, but it's really sore. All right, we'll take a day off. Okay, don't try and that early in the season, there's no reason for them to be throwing through anything. Okay, again, these are guidelines, it's not an absolute. Okay, for more physically mature players, this was something that I learned, again, this was something I learned just from listening, okay, and learning from people who knew baseball. You know, for more physically mature players, maybe your collegiate players, okay, or maybe your advanced high school players, you know, soreness may not necessarily be a stop sign, especially mid to late season, okay? You don't just say, whoa, 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 you're sore, put the ball down, okay? If it's just their normal soreness, it's some arm soreness, maybe they've pitched a lot, you look back at your notebook, they've pitched a lot in the last 2 weeks, okay? You know, one of the athletes I worked with kind of enlightened me to this, and it makes a lot of sense. You know, when you're sore, and again, I'm not advocating that people go out there and get injured, let's be clear, okay? But when you're sore, if you go out to throw as a physically mature pitcher, okay, it teaches them what works for them to get their arm loose. Okay, I went out and I just played catch out to 75 feet for about 20 minutes and I felt great. Or, you know what, I stretched out to 120 for about 5 throws at the end of the session, I really felt good. It may be individual, but it's going to teach them what they need to do to be like, okay, I feel good now, I'm ready to go. Okay, and also, interestingly enough, you know, if your arm's really hanging, it teaches them to use every other part of their body with their arm. Does that make sense? If their arm's sore, they're going to be like, you know, they're going to do everything they can to kind of protect their arm. And anecdotally, or as an additional side, it teaches them to use other parts of their body. Okay? As we know, throwing doesn't just come from your arm. It comes from, you know, it starts at your foot. Okay? And then works through your leg, through your hip, through your spine, and then through your upper body, and then eventually exits through the ball. Okay? So, again, just so I'm clear, I don't advocate you do this with your 11-year-old or your 10-year-old, okay? But if you're working with more physically mature athletes, you know, pay close attention to their soreness and what kind of soreness they're having. If they're coming off of a Tommy John and they're like, hey, my elbow's really sore, whoa, let's take a break. But if it's a guy who's relatively healthy, who's just thrown a lot, you know, under a watchful eye, it's okay to do. Okay, it's gonna be beneficial to them. Okay. Volume, okay? Again, pretty simple. Number of throws and at what distances, okay? How many throws are you making? And again, this is very simple. Start lower and gradually build to higher, okay? And then again, I'll notate what distances. If I'm giving somebody a throwing program and their last, maybe they're stretching it out to 120 feet, I'll tell them, I want you to make your last 10 throws at 90 feet. Okay, so that way it's a little more quantified as opposed to them getting out to 120 feet after their first 5 throws and they make 50 throws at 120 feet. Does that make sense? Okay. And again, there's 2 ways of looking at volume. Okay. Same session. How many throws are you making in one session? Okay, 50 throws, 40 throws. And then cumulative, how many in a week? Okay, so for example, if my goal is 150 throws for a week, or let's say a number that's easy for me to do math with, let's say 120 throws for a week, I could either do 3 40-throw sessions, okay, or I can do 4 30-throw sessions, and they're going to be different. Okay, if a guy is sore, if they're younger, I want to spread it out over more outings. Okay, so you're still getting the same number of throws in a week, but it's a little less stressful if you spread it out. Okay, make sense? Okay. Volume, again, the goal is to grow a callus for when you need it. That's important. Okay, you need it for the season. And as I mentioned before, tissues will adapt to the stresses you place on them. Okay, so essentially what we're trying to do is develop the athlete's ability to withstand throwing a lot at varying intensities. That's the goal of the throwing program. Okay, Truth, as I mentioned before, there's only so many bullets in the gun. Every throw should have a purpose, okay? You know, so again, don't waste your throws, okay? And again, that kind of gets back to why you need a period of time that's 0, all right? I'm going to save your bullets. Okay, volume, again, start low, gradually build, low volume and frequency, then low volume and increasing frequency, and then increasing volume and high frequency. Make sense? So you start out, let's say, 2 days a week at 25 throws, okay? And then you may do 25 throws at 3 to 4 days a week. That's your increasing frequency. And then you may do, let's say, 40 throws at 4 days a week. Okay? Just as a rough aside, maybe mapped out over, I don't know, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, okay? Stick to the plan, okay? Your kid goes out there and they're like, hey, Dad, I really love this throwing program. This is awesome. I'm blazing the ball. You can barely catch it. And he goes, I love this. And he sits out there, he gets to 30 throws, which is what he was prescribed. And he's like, I just want to keep going. This feels really good. Stick to the plan. Okay, cut it. Stick to the plan. Don't throw 40 throws, don't throw 50 throws. Don't go beyond your frequencies and what you've mapped out. Okay, trust the process. All right, and then again, as I mentioned, specify volumes at distances. I'll usually, it doesn't have to be like, okay, at 45 feet, I want this many throws. At 53 feet, I want this many throws. And at 55 feet, it's more like, okay, I want you to work your way, warm up and work your way back to 75 feet, you know, with, let's say, 30 throws, okay, working your way back there. Then I may specify. Okay, at 75 feet, I want you to make 10 throws. I want 10 throws at 90 and 10 throws at 100. Okay? So as you get out to your higher distances, that's when you specify, but it doesn't have to be meticulous. Okay? Example, 12-year-old, weeks 1 and 2 sessions a week, 25 throws week 1, 30 throws week 2, 3 and 4, maybe 3 non-consecutive sessions of 30 to 35 throws. All right? Week 5, 3 non-consecutive sessions of 40 throws, and then week 6 and 7, 4 sessions, okay? Back-to-back, 1 back-to-back week 6, 2 week 7, 40, 45 throws. And again, you can adjust all this according to how physically mature they are, what their age is, okay? And again, as I mentioned, don't worry about being super specific. It's more just following the basic principles. Okay. Intensity, how hard are you throwing the ball? Again, pre-season, you should gradually build. In season, it's going to vary based on your workload when you're competing. Okay, where the pitcher is relative to their appearances. Okay, that's what they're going to do day 1. Okay, it just depends on where they're at. Okay, and again, as I mentioned, there's 2 ways of gauging that: distance or just perceived intensity. So if I wanted to play catch in here and we have, I don't know how many yards it is, 40 yards, 30 yards, or whatever it is, I can lollipop it. I can lollipop it, okay, or I'm throwing it on a line, okay. And you can just look at it again. It doesn't have to be super specific. It's just like throw it hard and intense, really try and get it there on a line, or just kind of stretch your arm out and kind of go a little bit easier. Okay. Again, it doesn't have to be super specific. All right. It just has to be some attention paid to the intensity of throws. Okay. Distance. There's a guy named Rick Knapp. He was the minor league pitching coordinator for the Twins for many, many years when they were producing guys like Johan Santana, Francisco Liriano, Joe Nathan, a bunch of guys who came up through the system and became very good pitchers. And real simple guy. And, you know, he made a point once that's kind of hard to argue with, that, you know, if you can throw a ball far, you can throw it long. I mean, you can throw a ball far, you can throw it hard. Okay? So as such, when you're looking at your throwing program, the idea is to gradually build the ability to throw at a distance. Okay, that's to be able to throw at higher and higher intensities. Okay, the one thing I would add, and if any of you, I'm sure folks out here have probably researched, they follow Alan Yeager or some of these guys who are throwing at 200 or 250 feet. There's a distance at which it becomes counterproductive. Okay, if you're a pitcher, you know, your mechanics are very important. getting to your release point is very important. Okay, getting through the ball like they talk about. If you get out to 250 feet and you're just trying to throw the heck out of the ball and get it there, you're going to be stepping and then you're going to be throwing here, okay, just to try and get an arc on it and get it there. I believe that becomes counterproductive. Like if you're a shortstop or if you're a pitcher, you need to be able to make a hard, accurate throw with good mechanics. So when you reach a certain distance, it's not just like, hey, I threw it at 250 feet, you know, but it also went 250 feet in the air. Okay, that's counterproductive. All right, so that's the one kind of asterisk I would add to this. You know, the only kind of exception being is if they're an outfielder and they need to make exceptionally long throws, you know, maybe then they do stretch it out to a distance. Okay. Questions so far? Trying to get everybody out on time here. Okay. You know, example, again, the same 12-year-old, 25 to 30 throws, working their way back to 60 to 75 feet. 5 throws at distance week 1, 10 throws week 2. Meaning when they get out to 75 feet, make 5 throws at 75 feet the first week. Okay, the second week, maybe make 10 throws at distance.
These guys are practicing this stuff. Is there like a certain like warm up that you're suggesting that they do, or is it literally just start off?
Usually what they'll do, yeah, usually what they'll do is they'll start throwing at like, I don't know, it depends on the individual, but maybe just start at 40 feet. It's real short, and it's just here.
These sessions are just like all throwing.
Yes, exactly. Yep, so what they'll do is you start at a short distance, and you know, and as it progresses, you start to step back a little bit, make a few throws, okay, work your way back. And you know, again, it doesn't have to be exact, but like if you're on a field, you can estimate distances. I mean, you can even use like, okay, if, you know, what is it, 90 feet on the base paths? Okay, that looks like 90 feet. All right, now I'm gonna kind of look at where he's at. That looks like about 90 feet, you know? But you start in close and low, and then kind of build your way back as you warm up. Okay, so that's what I meant by, you know, work your way back to 60 feet, let's say, and then you start counting your throws at different distances. But I'll just give them a rough number like, hey, take 30 throws to get back to 75 feet, and then I want 10 at this distance, 10 at this distance, 5 at this distance.
Right, so you're not really like counting those first 30 throws, so.
I'll count them, but I don't need like 10 at 20 feet, 10 at 30 feet. It's more just to comfort and to individual, just kind of gradually working their way back and be like, all right, this is throw number 20. I'm almost at 60 feet. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Does that answer your question?
This is kind of my role right here with my son. My question is, what if he enjoys pitching as well? How do I incorporate that as well, some of the long toss as far as that goes?
That's what we're going to get into.
Sorry?
That's what we're going to get into.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, so here's the problem, okay?
I just don't know where that balance is.
Yeah,
So that's why I'm
well,
here.
it's a very important question
That's fine.
because the kid can enjoy pitching, but if they're young, it's not one of those things like if your kid enjoys shooting hockey pucks, they can shoot until there's, you know, the garage door looks like a pockmarked mess. Okay, with pitching, you really need to be careful with that. Okay, which we're going to talk a little bit about briefly. But essentially what it is once you hit like weeks 4, weeks 5, then you bring them back into distance, okay, roughly a mound distance, and have them do flat ground.
Right.
Okay, because it's less stressful on their arm than getting off of the mound. So that's where they can work on their delivery, they can work on their mechanics. You know, and the other piece of this is, let's say, in November, okay, they can take pitching lessons in November, but they're not going to remember any of that when March comes. So to your point, with a younger athlete, looking at the calendar and saying, okay, he's been throwing since January, I'm going to call up Jason and I want to schedule a weekly pitching lesson with their pitching coach starting in February. And that way they go February, 4 sessions, 2 sessions at the beginning of March, and then that carries over nicely into the season. Okay, along with their flat ground work on their own. So Jason teaches them a few things. They play long toss with you or with their buddy, and they can work on things that Jason may teach them, little technique things, little mechanics things, or flat ground sessions, and get the enjoyment out of it, but also not put their arm at substantial risk.
So are you or are you not recommending long toss in the season?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes, yeah, but maybe at reduced distances or at reduced frequencies and volumes. Because then you gotta look at the whole pie. In the preseason, all they're doing is throwing to get ready. Whereas in season, now they're practicing and making throws, they're throwing bullpens. So you're still gonna long toss, but probably less, okay? Let's see here. In season, okay? Develop a good warm-up routine, can be different for different players, okay? Again, like I mentioned before, just make sure it's not mindless throwing and talking. So to your point, maybe they play catch starting at 20, 30 feet and work their way back to 70 feet, you know, to get loose before a game, okay, or a practice. And as such, what they can do is you know, that's going to help loosen their arm up pre-practice, and it's also going to continue to build arm strength, okay? But again, not using all your bullets for just warming up.
Are you going to be going into warming up before practices or games as well?
What I'll do is after we're done, we can talk more specifically about it for sure. Again, look at the weekly calendar. Schedule your more intense throwing prior to a day off. So again, back to your point, if you want them to long toss in season, maybe they have Sunday off, okay? Or if it's a pitcher, he's not going to be pitching on Saturday, have him long toss on Saturday so he can recover on Sunday. Or on Wednesday, or whatever it is. You just try and schedule it prior to a day where they're going to have time off. Okay? Tips: keep a log, be consistent and disciplined, keep rest as rest, use a step behind with your throwing, okay? Meaning just kind of get their legs into it. Teach them to use their lower body when they're throwing, okay? And again, be flexible based on how you feel and what schedule or life will allow. Rain, conflicts, throwing space, throwing partners, okay? A little brief bit about skill acquisition. I'm not a skill coach, okay? Well, what I will say is, you know, overall, you need good quality reps and instruction, and the important part of this is at an appropriate time relative to the season, okay? If they're going into baseball season, okay, that's prior to that is when you want to do your skill work. You don't want to do it at the end of October. You don't want to do it in November. Okay, because again, you're going to forget things. I mean, if anybody here golfs, which I don't, but you know, if you're golfing and you're in the middle of the season and you've been playing golf maybe twice a week, you know, your swing is grooved and you're in a groove. Come April, the first warm day, you're shanking everything into the woods and you're topping balls. Okay, because your body kind of forgets it. It's a skill, all right? So as such, schedule your hitting, your fielding, and your throwing when it's going to carry over, all right? In proximity to their season. Again, it's learning. They're trying to learn a skill which involves the brain, okay? You know, skill acquisition, and again, all these slides are on the handout on my website, okay? You know, essentially, it's kind of a simple way of looking at things. You can see it with youth sports, simple to complex. You're trying to teach them something, like how to throw, break it down into small, simple steps, becoming more complex as they master those, okay? Conscious to subconscious, meaning they have to think, okay, here's that ground ball, here it's coming at me, if I'm going to do a backhand, I got to do this. They're thinking about it, but eventually they do enough of them, okay, like Johnny, they can do it in their sleep, okay? That's skill acquisition, breaking things down into simple components, mastering your fundamentals, okay? You don't need to work on the footwork for turning a double play for an 8-year-old who can't throw the ball from second to first, okay? You know, and practice simple cueing. Don't confuse them, okay? And have a plan and think about the components of the task. If you play shortstop, the components are, you know, recognizing the ball coming off of the bat, moving your feet in an appropriate way to be in position to field the ball or to block the ball, okay, so you're not out of position, fielding the ball, transferring the ball from the glove to your hand, and then making a good throw. And that all goes into a routine ground ball, which you do 10,000, 15,000 of them, it becomes second nature. But for my 9-year-old, it's not second nature at all, because he's like, wonder if Dad's going to get me gummy bears after the game or after practice, you know, and then the ball goes right under his, you know, under the wickets. So, pitching, okay, this is our last bit here, all right. You know, again, this gets back to priority number 1, which is develop a strong throwing arm with consistent sound throwing mechanics. So back to your son as an example, if he loves pitching and he wants to get better at it, he really, the big goal is to develop a strong arm. Okay, that's number one. There's a number of people in the pros who became successful pitchers who never pitched in youth or high school, maybe not even in college. There's a number of them that you can go through, okay, that just had really strong throwing arms. And then they're like, hey, wow, you really have a good arm, it's very accurate, and you got a little bit of funny movement at the end of it, let's put you on the mound. I had a catcher who was a big guy, he was probably about 6'6", 240, and had a hose for an arm, could really throw the ball hard, and his throws naturally tailed just a little bit, okay, when they would get towards second. Okay, so guess what kind of pitch he could throw really well? He was a good sinker baller, okay? And they moved him over to pitching at Double-A. A guy named Pete Walker, who had a long career pitching in the bullpen in the majors, probably 10 years. He was an outfielder at UConn. And then when he got to the pros, they switched him over to being a pitcher. Okay, so you don't necessarily have to be a good pitcher from 8. You know, I have a neighbor who was like, oh, Jake's really getting it. You know, you should see him. He struck out the side the other day. You know, and I'm watching him throw, and yeah, he struck out the side, and he can master how to get the ball over the plate, but, you know, he's 8. Okay, he's not throwing 80 miles an hour with movement. He's not mixing up pitches. He's not painting in the flat. He just learned how to throw strikes. And most 8-year-olds can't hit the ball. You know, so don't worry too much about those things. The big goal is getting a strong throwing arm. Okay. You know, you can make the argument, if anything, pitching consistently at a very young age subjects the young arm to unnecessary stresses. Your 8-year-olds, your 7-year-olds, okay? Okay, don't overuse any young kid pitching under any circumstances. I don't care how good they are, okay? Or less bad. I treat a guy who, he travels the country, this guy Bob Bigelow, maybe some of you have heard of him, but he gives talks all over the country about how not to ruin kids' sports. And he's full of gems, you know. And one of them I was talking to him, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm like, you know, my son's 9, and he did barnstormers. You know, there were some 10-year-olds next to him. I'm like, yeah, you know, it's, you know, there's some good pitching, you know, with the 10-year-olds. He goes, less bad. I was like, you're right. You know, another one of my favorite quotes that he has is, you know, what's wrong with 9-year-old hockey is that most of the people running it haven't been 9 in 30 years. You know, it's kind of true. So, you know, forget about breaking balls, you know, until they're somewhat skeletally mature, and until they can consistently repeat and command the fastball. Okay, your kid doesn't need to know how to throw a cutter if they can't consistently throw strikes and repeat their motion. Okay, especially if you're looking at long-term development. You want your kid to get good over the years and over their career. You know, you're looking long-term. Okay, don't throw curveballs at age 9. Okay.
When would you start adding another? I mean, skeleton as a high schooler, you may not even have it at 16 or 17.
Yeah, but they're going to be bigger and stronger, and most of them, maybe not all of them, but they won't have open growth plates. You know, probably Jason's folks here, the pitching instructors, could probably give you a better answer on that. But I mean, throwing breaking balls, I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Like at 13 years old, we don't, until you can start throwing strikes, you're not throwing breaking balls, period. We might introduce it, but really in a reduced setting. You know, 13, 14 introduction, we won't even go breaking balls, we'll go change ups, and then maybe you can graduate to breaking balls. So I think it's more of a ratio of fastballs to change ups to breaking balls, and as they get older.
Puts so much more torque on the elbow and the wrist.
Totally agree.
And if they don't have the strength, I mean, why even bother?
Totally agree. I think you can be really effective as a pitcher throwing fastballs in and out, and you're going to find a lot of success. And if you can throw a changeup for a strike as well, you can probably live through high school with just those 2 pitches.
If you could throw a fastball inside, a fastball outside, a high fastball, and a low fastball, you're going to let people out.
And a changeup.
Trying to convince the kids that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Or the parents, I should say.
Yeah, you're right. It's both. You're right. You know, again, start with mindful throwing. Your throws have a purpose. Focus on repeating the same mechanics with catch and long toss, and throw with intent. Have a purpose for your throws. Okay. Flat ground work, okay, back to our discussion earlier, you know, it's an invaluable component of preparation. It's less stressful on the arm. Okay, getting off of a mound is stressful on an arm because if I go to throw and I'm throwing the ball across here, most of my force vectors are going this way. The ball's going to be pulling me this way. My body's going to be moving this way, which is going to pull my arm back this way, but everything's linear. Okay, I start getting up on the mound. How high is the mound? 11 inches? 10 inches?
Yeah, I think it's, yeah.
Something like that? What I said.
I don't remember, 17 and a half.
You know, but now you're introducing a downhill component to things. So it's not just these horizontal forces that you're experiencing. Now I'm going here, which is going to introduce these types of forces. That's why throwing off of a mound is a big deal. And that's why, for example, a professional, if they start playing catch in early November, they may not set foot off the mound until mid-December, late December, you know, early January even. You know, and when they do, it's like, okay, I threw 20 pitches. I threw 15 pitches, straight fastballs, that's it. Okay, just because that's when the forces really start to ramp up. But that's where your flat ground work becomes a great substitution. Okay, because to your point, if you're a pitcher and you enjoy it, and it takes a lot of repetition to get good at it, and you don't want to be doing it all in a game, okay, your flat ground work is going to be less stressful. So, for example, what I might do with a kid who's, let's say, 12 or 13, who's thrown for 4 or 5 weeks already, is maybe twice that week, have them throw 15 pitches of flat ground work after their long tossing. Okay, so they long toss, come back into the pitching distance, and then throw 15 fastballs. Okay, so that way you can work on the feel, you can work on your foot placement, you can work on your release point, you can work on when you're breaking your hands, and you're not worrying about damaging yourself. Okay, to your point, you can get better, but without, you know, using all your bullets and exposing them to unnecessary stress. Does that make sense? You know, and then as it gets close, like let's say it's a week before practice starts, and they're a skeletally mature pitcher who's throwing breakers. Okay, I'm going to have you mix in, you know, 2 or 3 weeks before practice starts. I want you to throw 10 fastballs, 5 changeups, 5 curveballs. Okay, flat ground. It could be from the stretch, it could be from the windup, whatever. But that's how you start working on your pitching, but without necessarily burning through your bullets. Does that make sense? Okay. You know, stretch or wind up, keep it low volume. Okay, start with just fastballs, then the change up, and eventually breaking pitches.
Just real quick question. Flat ground work saying do it at the end. So he's doing kind of throwing off a mound. Do you recommend them throwing a few flat ground before they end the throwing session? Is that what that means?
I'm sorry?
The second bullet point, do it at the end of a throwing session. Does that mean if you're throwing off a mound, you recommend them going to do some flat
No,
ground?
no, no. So what I'll do is like if they long toss, and let's say I'm having them work out to 120 feet,
Yeah.
then they come back into 60
Okay, that's
feet, and then that's when they do their flat ground work, and then, because their arm's nice and loose, everything is primed, okay, everything's warm, then you go through your delivery, okay, work on your release point, the ball's feeling good, it's coming out of my hand good, throw 20 of them, your brain learns those mechanics, okay, and then you call it. Does that make sense? That's how you learn your skill. Okay, flat ground work again allows you to practice. Start late, and maybe week 3 or 4 you're throwing with just straight 15 fastballs. Okay, 1 to 2 times a week. All right. Mound work again, like I said, is stressful in the arm. It's due to the drop in height. Needs to be done at the right time. Don't waste these sessions. Okay. Because you should only be doing a certain frequency of these, maybe once a week leading into practice, okay? And you should only be doing a certain volume, 20 pitches, 25 pitches, okay? And again, start with once a week. First session is maybe 25 pitches, all fastball. So let's take your 14-year-old pitcher, week 6, maybe. Okay, if they're throwing program, get them off of the mound. Maybe week 5, it depends on how mature they are and how long they've been throwing for. Okay. Again, these are just guidelines as well. You know, and are you ready? Okay, the goal preseason depends on your age, but for example, you know, you should be able to throw, maybe before you're ready for practice or leave for camp, you should be able to throw a 50-pitch bullpen twice, mix all your pitches, and even with your more mature pitchers, okay, work on getting them up and down to simulate the break of an inning, because you're going to cool down during innings. okay? So have them throw 20 pitches, sit down for 10 or 15 minutes, look at Instagram or whatever, okay? And then get back up and throw another 20 to 25. That way you know you're ready to go. You don't have to be mid-season form leading into practice, but you need to be fairly close to being able to withstand the stresses, okay? Summary, kid has to enjoy the sport, get good quality strength and conditioning as soon as they're ready. Very, very important. Don't forget about rest, play multiple sports, quality skill work at the appropriate times, and a planned throwing program is essential. Again, don't get too caught up in the details of things, okay, but just kind of follow the rough principles. All right? Any questions?
They're tossed away balls. So a lot of people are using weighted balls.
I personally don't like them. I'm not the most familiar with them, okay, as far as the specifics of them. But if you think about the physics of it, I'm throwing the ball, you know, your shoulder, okay, when you're accelerating towards the plate, I forget what the number is, but it's maybe 3,400, let's say 3,600 degrees per second. So your shoulder is going to be rotating 10 times around the clock per second, okay? You increase the weight of the ball by, and it's not like hey, they worked out for 2 months. No, this is your off season. You're going to go work out with Brian maybe twice a week, maybe 4 times a week, maybe 3 times a week. Get bigger, get stronger, get more athletic, and then they can throw the ball, farther. They can hit the ball farther. They can run faster. That's really the big thing. You can make the argument that more explosive athletes with a higher vertical jump can throw the ball harder, right? So I think that's the biggest thing that gets overlooked before you start talking about, to quote the guy I know, picking the pepper out of the fly shit. you know what I mean? Like, oh, I don't think you cocked your arm enough, or you know what, you should have been using the 5-ounce ball, not the 3-ounce ball. Whereas if you just come in and show up and work out, that makes a big difference, I think. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Any other questions at all? All right, great. I really appreciate everybody coming out. We're here, okay? So Brian's facility is here for training. We run groups, we run one-on-one training. I'm here, okay, a couple days a week if people need rehab or anybody you know lives around here or whatever. We haven't been here for long, so we're hoping to get the name out, get the word out. Keep your eyes peeled for somewhere late winter, earlier winter maybe. We're conceptualizing like a spring training, okay, an all-inclusive kind of spring training for here, okay, that includes throwing, that includes hitting, that includes working out, to try and make it easy for your athlete to get ready for the season. So I appreciate everybody coming out, and hopefully the Red Sox are still a rain play. Thank you. All right.
Thanks, John. Thank you for coming. Right out.